It was supposed to be a day of joy, a day of celebration, a day where the scent of chocolate and the laughter of children would fill the house and chase away the shadows of the past. The morning sun had streamed through the kitchen windows, casting a warm, golden glow on the countertops as my grandchildren, with their tiny hands and eager faces, helped me measure flour and crack eggs. For them, it was a game, a messy, delightful adventure. For me, it was a pilgrimage back in time, a way to honor a love that had been the bedrock of my entire existence. I could almost see her there, my Eleanor, standing by the stove with a smudge of flour on her cheek and that patient, knowing smile on her face. I could hear her voice, a soft melody in my ear, telling me to add just a pinch more salt, to not overmix the batter, to always make it with love. That cake was more than just a dessert. It was a legacy. It was the very same recipe she had used for every one of our son Michael's birthdays for as long as I could remember. It was the taste of his childhood, a tangible link to a mother he'd lost too soon. I saw the recognition in his eyes when he walked into the kitchen, a flicker of something deep and bittersweet crossing his face. It was a secret we shared, a silent conversation between father and son, a way of saying, "She's still here, with us." The kids had been absolute angels. Little Sarah had insisted on cracking the eggs herself, and though a bit of shell ended up in the bowl, we fished it out with a laugh. Young Tom, my grandson, had meticulously measured the cocoa powder, his brow furrowed in concentration as if he were performing brain surgery. The kitchen was a beautiful disaster of spilled sugar and smeared chocolate, but the air was thick with the kind of joy that felt almost sacred. For those few hours, my grief felt a little lighter, my heart a little fuller. The cake emerged from the oven perfectly. It was dark, rich, and the smell was intoxicating. As it cooled on the rack, the kids helped me whip up the buttercream frosting, their eyes wide with anticipation. The final result was a thing of beauty, or at least it was to my eyes. It was imperfect, homemade, and absolutely perfect. I had even written "Happy Birthday, Dad" in wobbly icing, with a little help from Sarah's steady hand. It was a masterpiece born from love, laughter, and a little bit of chaos. As the time for the party drew near, the house began to fill with the rest of the family. My daughter-in-law, Patricia, arrived with her mother, a woman named Gloria who had always looked at me with a strange, judgmental air. I had never quite understood it. I was always polite, always welcoming, but there was a frost in her gaze that I could never seem to melt. Patricia, too, had become more distant over the years. I chalked it up to her busy life as a working mother, but a part of me always suspected she saw me as some sort of burden, a reminder of a past she couldn't quite relate to. We gathered in the living room, the air buzzing with chatter and the excited shrieks of children. The birthday cake sat in the center of the dining table, the centerpiece of the celebration. My heart swelled as I looked at my family. Michael, my son, so successful, so strong, yet with a softness in his eyes that he'd gotten from his mother. His wife, Patricia, and her mother, Gloria, were seated close together, whispering in a way that felt separate from the rest of the group. Michael gave me a warm smile and a thumbs up from across the room. He knew what that cake meant. He knew the hours of work and love that had gone into it. He knew it was a piece of his mother, presented to him on his special day. Someone dimmed the lights, and the familiar chorus began, "Happy birthday to you." Everyone in the room joined in, their voices a sweet, harmonious blend. I saw Sarah and Tom clapping their hands in excitement, their eyes fixed on the flickering candles. I watched Michael's face, illuminated by the warm glow. This was it. This was the moment I had been looking forward to for weeks. Then, everything shattered. Before the final notes of the song could even fade, Patricia lunged forward. With a swift, violent motion, she grabbed the cake. My cake, our cake. The cake that represented a lifetime of love, and with a sickening thud, she dumped it straight into the kitchen trash can. The beautiful dark frosting was now splattered against the side of the garbage bin, a crushed and desecrated monument to my efforts. The room fell into a stunned, deafening silence. The children's faces fell from happy anticipation to utter confusion. My own heart seemed to stop beating, a cold dread seeping into my veins. I stared at the ruined cake, my mind refusing to process the scene unfolding before me. Then Patricia turned to me, her face twisted with fury. Her voice, sharp and accusatory, cut through the silence like a shard of glass. My mother only eats vanilla. She has a chocolate allergy. How dare you bake this? And this cake looks like garbage. What kind of a useless, senile old man are you? Trying to poison my mother on my husband's birthday. The words were a physical assault. I stood there, utterly stunned, my mouth agape. All the joy, all the love, all the memories that had been carefully baked into that cake were now lying in the trash, and I was being publicly shamed for it. I looked over at Gloria, who was smirking, a look of smug satisfaction on her face. She wasn't having an allergic reaction. She wasn't clutching her throat. She was simply enjoying the spectacle of my humiliation. The silence that followed her outburst was thick, heavy, and suffocating. I could feel the eyes of my entire family on me, a mix of pity, shock, and confusion. My own grandchildren were looking at Patricia with fear. The shame was so profound, so overwhelming, that I wished the floor would open up and swallow me whole. I thought I was going to be sick. The simple, beautiful act of love I had tried to perform had been turned into a weapon against me. And then, a voice broke the silence. It was low, calm, and laced with a quiet steel I had rarely heard from my son. Michael stood up from his chair, his eyes fixed not on me, but on his mother-in-law. He wasn't looking at Patricia, who had just committed the act of cruelty. He looked directly at Gloria, the source of the chaos. "I respect you," Michael began, his tone polite but leaving no room for argument. "But it's time for you to take your daughter and leave my house." A collective gasp went through the room. Patricia's face, which had been flushed with rage, now went pale. She looked at her husband, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What did you say to my mother?" she shrieked, her voice rising to a fever pitch. Michael didn't flinch. He didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Gloria. "You heard me," he stated calmly. "It's time for you both to go. Now." Patricia exploded with a fury that was terrifying to witness. She started screaming, her voice a torrent of incoherent insults and threats. The calm, composed woman I knew was gone, replaced by a monster of pure, unadulterated rage. In a fit of complete madness, she turned her fury on me. She rushed towards me, her hands outstretched, her face a mask of hatred. I was frozen in place, unable to move, unable to defend myself. I saw the fury in her eyes, and for a terrifying moment, I thought she was going to physically attack me. But before she could touch me, Michael was there. He moved with a swiftness and grace that I didn't know he possessed. He stepped in front of me, using his body as a shield, and stopped his wife's advance. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shove her back. He simply stood there, a human wall between me and her rage. He looked down at her, his eyes holding her gaze, and said the words that would haunt her. "You will never disrespect my father again." The finality, the absolute iron will in his voice, was undeniable. He wasn't arguing with her. He wasn't negotiating. He was simply stating an unbreakable law. The authority in his voice seemed to suck the air out of the room. Patricia sputtered, her rage turning to shock. She looked from her husband's resolute face to me, then back to her mother, who was now standing, her face a mask of cold fury. For a moment nobody moved. It was a standoff, a battle of wills. Michael walked over to the coat rack and picked up his mother-in-law's purse and his wife's coat. He held them out to them without a word. It was a silent, powerful command. The message was clear: your time here is done. A tense moment passed. The silence was broken only by Patricia's ragged breathing. Then, with a venomous look that could curdle milk, Gloria snatched her purse from her son-in-law's hand. She grabbed her daughter by the arm, pulling her violently toward the door. "Come on, Patricia," she hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We're not wanted here. We'll see how long this little fantasy lasts." Patricia shot one last look of pure, unadulterated hatred at Michael, a look that seemed to promise retribution. Then, she allowed herself to be dragged out the door by her mother, who slammed it shut with a deafening bang. The resounding slam of the door seemed to echo in the silent aftermath. The shock of the scene was so profound that for a long moment, the entire family remained frozen, a tableau of disbelief. The children stared at the door, their faces pale, their young minds unable to process the violence of the adult world that had just intruded upon their celebration. My own heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat that seemed to fill the silent room. I was trembling, a fine tremor that I couldn't control, the adrenaline of the confrontation coursing through my elderly body. Michael stood with his back to me, his shoulders squared, staring at the door. I could see the tension in his frame, the quiet fury he was holding inside. Finally, he let out a long, slow breath and turned around. His eyes met mine, and in them, I saw not just anger, but a profound sadness and a fierce, unwavering protectiveness. He walked over to the trash can. The beautiful cake, the symbol of my love and his childhood, lay there, a ruined mess of chocolate and frosting. Without a word, he knelt down, picked up the garbage can, and walked over to the sink. I felt a fresh wave of shame wash over me. I couldn't even bear to look at the mess. The rest of the family began to stir. My brother, who had been sitting in stunned silence, came over and put a hand on my shoulder. "You okay, Frank?" he asked softly. I could only manage a weak nod, unable to find the words to express the torrent of emotions swirling inside me. Embarrassment, anger, a deep, crushing sorrow. I had tried to do something beautiful for my son, and it had been turned into a public humiliation. Then I heard a soft whisper. It was little Sarah. She was tugging on her grandmother's sleeve, her eyes wide. "Grandma, look," she said, pointing at the sink. We all turned. Michael was rinsing the cake from the trash can, his hands carefully scooping the ruined dessert from the debris. I felt a lump form in my throat. What was he doing? Why was he salvaging this broken, soiled thing? He scraped the clean part of the cake, the sections that hadn't touched the bottom of the trash can, into a clean bowl. He didn't look at anyone. He simply worked, his movements methodical and precise. He scraped off the dirty frosting, salvaging the top layer of the cake. He walked over to the counter and cut himself a generous slice. Then, he walked over to the table, directly to where his mother-in-law and wife had been sitting. He stood there, holding the plate. Then, with a decisive action, he did something that stole the breath from the room. He reached out with his other hand and, in one swift, firm motion, he swept the offending plates, the untouched cake forks, and the pristine napkins that had been set out for Gloria and Patricia, sending them clattering across the table. The message was symbolic and powerful. The places they had occupied were being erased from this celebration. He placed the plate of salvaged cake, the one piece of our cake that had been saved, directly on the table in the spot where Patricia had been sitting. He looked at the rest of us. "It's still good," he said, his voice low but clear. "The middle is perfectly clean. It's still Mom's cake." He picked up the fork, took a big bite of the cake, and closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were shining. "It's perfect, Dad," he said, his voice catching just a little. "It tastes just like hers." The tension in the room broke. Sarah, with the innocence of a child, grabbed a fork and asked, "Can I have some, Daddy?" Michael smiled, cut her a piece, and then gave some to Tom. I watched my grandchildren, my son, and the rest of my family sharing this piece of salvaged love. The shame I had felt began to recede, replaced by a different kind of emotion. It was a mixture of pride in my son and a deep, aching grief that had been momentarily soothed. It was a small, humble rebellion, but it was ours. The day was not lost. My son had refused to let it be taken from him. He had taken the rotten, ugly moment and salvaged the good from it. He had saved the cake. He had saved my dignity. He had stood up for what was right, for what was sacred, for the memory of his mother, and for me. The party went on. It was subdued, of course, the shadow of the incident still lingering. But the laughter came back. Sarah and Tom forgot their fear and began to play with their toys. My brother cracked a joke, and a few people laughed. We forced ourselves to enjoy the day, to reclaim it from the bitter taste of Patricia's rage. We sang Happy Birthday again, a softer, more subdued version, without the chocolate cake. I had made a simple vanilla sheet cake, just in case anyone didn't like chocolate. I brought it out from the kitchen, and we sang to a tired, but relieved Michael. He looked at me and smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Thank you, Dad," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "For everything." The rest of the evening was a quiet affair. I spent most of the time playing with the kids, their innocent joy a balm to my frayed nerves. But my mind was elsewhere, kept replaying the scene, the shock, the anger, the sound of the cake hitting the trash can. Patricia's face twisted in rage, her accusations ringing in my ears. And then, my son's voice, calm, resolute, and utterly devastating to his wife and her mother. As I drove home that night, a wave of exhaustion washed over me. The adrenaline that had sustained me through the evening finally gave way, and I felt the full weight of what had happened. My house, which usually felt warm and full of memories, felt cold and empty. I couldn't stop thinking about the look on Patricia's face. I had never seen her like that. It was as if a mask had slipped, revealing a monster hidden beneath the surface of a polite wife and mother. I thought about my son. I had always known he was a good man, but seeing him stand up for me in that way had filled me with a pride I couldn't even articulate. He had chosen me, his father, over his own wife. In a moment of crisis, he had made his loyalty clear. He had protected me, defended my honor, and upheld the memory of his mother. It was a gift I would carry with me for the rest of my life. The next day, I woke up feeling hollow. The house was quiet, too quiet. I made myself a cup of coffee, the familiar routine feeling strangely hollow. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the spot where my wife used to sit, and felt a profound loneliness. The image of the ruined cake, the slamming door, and Patricia's hateful face kept playing on a loop in my mind. It was a mental poison, a toxin that was slowly sapping my strength. I knew I had to call Michael. I needed to hear his voice to make sure he was okay. I dialed his number, my fingers trembling slightly. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, son," I said, my voice catching a little. "I just wanted to check on you. How are you doing?" There was a long pause. "I'm okay," he said, his voice hollow. Patricia and Tom went to visit her mother. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. They had left. The house was quiet. He was alone. "Are you sure you're okay, son?" I pressed. "You don't sound okay." "I'm just processing," he said with a heavy sigh. "Dad, I'm sorry about what happened. I should have done something sooner. I should have seen what Patricia was becoming. I didn't want to believe it." "Son, you have nothing to apologize for," I said firmly. "You were a hero yesterday. I've never been more proud of you." "Hero?" he scoffed. "I just stood up for my father. It was the only thing to do. It should have been the most natural thing in the world. Instead, it started a war. I don't know if I'm a hero, Dad. I just know I couldn't let it stand." "It was the right thing to do, Michael," I assured him. "And I'm so sorry this happened. This was supposed to be a happy day. I just wanted to make you feel close to your mother." "And you did," he said, his voice breaking just a little. "I felt her in every bite of that cake. You made her feel alive, Dad. Thank you." We talked for a while longer, but I could tell he was exhausted and emotionally drained. He needed time. We ended the call, and I felt a new weight settle on my shoulders. I had thought the drama was over, but it was just beginning. The storm had not passed. It was only gathering strength. Days passed. The silence was the worst part. Michael didn't call, and I didn't want to intrude. I knew he was dealing with the fallout of his decision. I could only imagine the war that was being waged in his house. Patricia was a proud, stubborn woman, and I doubted she was taking her banishment lying down. I imagined the arguments, the tears, the recriminations. It was a terrible thought, knowing my son was suffering because he had defended me. I was sitting on my back porch one afternoon, trying to get lost in a book, when I heard a familiar voice calling from the front of the house. "Mr. Harrison? Are you home?" I put my book down and walked to the front door. To my utter surprise, I found my daughter-in-law, Patricia, standing on my doorstep. She was alone. She looked different. She was dressed in simple jeans and a t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wasn't wearing any makeup, and her eyes were puffy and red-rimmed, as if she'd been crying. "Patricia," I stammered, completely taken aback. "What are you doing here? Is Michael okay? Are the kids okay?" "Michael and the kids are fine, Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice small and contrite. It was a stark contrast to the screaming banshee I'd encountered days ago. "Can I come in, please? I need to speak with you." I hesitated for a moment, the memory of her face twisted in rage still fresh in my mind. But I was a father. I was a man who believed in redemption. I opened the door wider and stepped aside. "Of course, come in." She walked into the living room and stood awkwardly in the middle of the floor, looking around as if she were seeing the place for the first time. She seemed lost, fragile. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the sofa. "Can I get you something to drink? A glass of water? Some tea?" She shook her head, her bottom lip trembling. "No, thank you, Mr. Harrison. I don't deserve your hospitality." I sat down in my armchair opposite her. I watched her, waiting. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. She took a deep, shaky breath, and then she met my eyes. The hatred I had seen in them was gone, replaced by something else. A deep, genuine shame. "Mr. Harrison," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry for what I did. I don't know what came over me." I was stunned. I had expected her to come with more accusations, more anger. Not this. I didn't know how to respond. "I have no excuse," she continued, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "It was a terrible, horrible thing to do. I disrespected you. I disrespected Michael. I disrespected the memory of your late wife. And I embarrassed myself in front of the entire family." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "I love Michael more than anything in the world. I love my children. And I have put all of that in jeopardy because I couldn't control my mother. She has always been a bully, Mr. Harrison. She has always been manipulative and controlling. But I never saw it. I was blind. I thought she was just being protective of me. But she's not. She poisoned my mind against you and against Michael." She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. "She doesn't have a chocolate allergy," she confessed. "She's just a controlling woman who can't stand to see anyone else happy. She hated seeing how close Michael was to you. She saw you as a threat, as a rival for my affection and for her grandchildren's affection. And I let her do it. I let her manipulate me, and I became a monster. I listened to her, my own anger slowly dissipating. It was hard to hold a grudge against someone who was sobbing and broken, who was admitting their faults so completely. "Patricia," I said softly, "it's okay. I'm not angry anymore." "How can you not be?" she asked, her voice raw. "I threw your cake in the trash. I called your beautiful cake garbage. I called you a useless, senile old man. I almost attacked you. People make mistakes," I said. "The important thing is that you're here now. You're admitting it. You're trying to make it right." "I'm not just trying to make it right," she said, her voice firming. "I'm here to tell you the truth. The whole truth. There's more, Mr. Harrison." I braced myself. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, as if steadying herself for a confession. "My mother, she's a vile woman. She's been trying to get Michael to sell this house. She says it's a money pit and that you're a drain on our finances. She's been whispering poison in my ear for years, telling me you were just living off us, that you didn't contribute anything." The statement hit me like a cold slap in the face. She wanted Michael to sell my house? "My mother doesn't want to be around you," she admitted, her voice bitter with self-loathing. "She thinks it's a sign of something that I married a man who is still so close to his family. She thinks it means I'm not his priority. She wanted us to distance ourselves from you. She wanted to take the grandchildren away from you." The pain in her words was palpable. She was realizing that she had been a pawn in her mother's game, a puppet whose strings had been pulled by a vindictive, manipulative woman. I loved your son the moment I saw him, she continued, her voice growing stronger. He is kind and good and strong. You raised a wonderful man, Mr. Harrison. And I was so afraid of losing him, of losing this family, that I let her control me. I wanted to please her. I wanted her approval. But when Michael looked at me that day, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. I had betrayed the only man I ever truly loved. She looked at me, her eyes full of tears. I don't want a divorce, Mr. Harrison. I don't want to lose my children. But more than anything, I don't want to lose Michael. I love him. Please, can you help me? Can you talk to him? It was a profound moment. The woman who had come to my house to destroy my life was now begging for my help to save hers. I realized that she wasn't my enemy. She was just a lost soul who had been manipulated by a master manipulator. Michael is a good man, I said gently. He loves you too, Patricia. He wouldn't have fought for you the way he did if he didn't. He would have just let you walk out the door. She gasped. He said that. He sent your mother and you away, I explained. He didn't send you away and tell you never to come back. He gave you space to think. He's giving you a chance. Her face crumpled. He told me to leave and not come back unless I could make things right. He said I had to fix it with you. I nodded. That's Michael. He's fair. And he loves his family. You just have to prove to him that you are on his side. Patricia and I talked for hours that afternoon. She revealed the depths of her mother's manipulations. Gloria had been spreading lies about me for years, telling Patricia that I was a mean, bitter, and controlling man who was trying to sabotage their marriage. Patricia, who had grown up with a controlling mother, had been conditioned to believe her. It was a devastating realization for her, and I could see her slowly shedding the layers of her mother's influence. She told me stories of her childhood, of the subtle ways her mother would undermine her confidence, making her feel like she was never good enough, that she needed her mother's guidance to survive. It was a textbook case of emotional abuse, and I felt a pang of sympathy for the woman I had considered my enemy. Stand up to her, Patricia, I said. You don't need her approval anymore. You have your own family now. You have Michael. You have the children. And you have me if you want me. Her eyes widened in surprise. You would do that? After everything? You are the mother of my grandchildren, I said. And you are the woman my son loves. That makes you family. And family is about forgiveness. It's about giving people a chance to change. She wept with gratitude. She took my hand and promised me she would make things right. She promised me she would stand up to her mother. She promised me that the shameful incident at the birthday party would be the last time I was ever treated with such disrespect. When she left, I felt a profound sense of peace. The storm was not over, but for the first time, I saw a path through it. There was hope. I didn't have to wait long. A week later, Michael called and invited me over for dinner. He said Patricia and the kids were going to be there, and he wanted me to come. I knew what this meant. It was a test. A reconciliation. When I walked into my son's house, the atmosphere was different. It wasn't tense. It was warm. Patricia greeted me with a hug and a genuine smile. The kids came running, eager to tell me about their week. We sat down to dinner. It was a simple meal, but it was perfect. During the meal, Michael looked at me, then at his wife, and his eyes sparkled. He took my hand under the table and gave it a squeeze. Dad, he began. Patricia and I have been talking. A lot. We've had some difficult conversations. She told me everything. I nodded, my heart full. And I have some news, he said. We're going to sell the house and move closer to you. I nearly choked on my food. What? That's not necessary, son. It is. Patricia interjected, her voice firm. It's my idea. We want to be closer to you. We want the children to grow up near their grandfather. This is the best thing for our family. My mother can either accept it or stay in her own world. I'm done letting her control my life. I looked at my son, and I saw a man who was happy, a man who was at peace. He had worked through his marital crisis. He had held his ground and gotten the result he wanted. You're sure? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. We're sure, Dad, Michael said, squeezing my hand again. We need to be a family. Our family. The one we built together. The dinner was a beautiful affair. We laughed. We talked. We made plans for the future. The ghost of the birthday party was finally laid to rest, replaced by the promise of a new beginning. As I drove home that night, I wasn't thinking about the man who had been humiliated, but about the man who had been loved. My son had chosen me. My daughter-in-law had chosen me. My grandchildren had chosen me. And I had forgiven them and they had forgiven me. I pulled into my driveway, the lonely house that suddenly felt like a home again. I had made the trip 1,000 times. But this one was different. I was lighter. I was happier. As I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, I noticed a faint, familiar scent. It was chocolate. I walked to the kitchen. There, on the counter, was a fresh chocolate cake, covered in a beautiful buttercream frosting. There was a small note beside it. For my amazing father-in-law. I'm learning. Love, Patricia. I stood in my kitchen, the silence of the house surrounding me, but for the first time in a long time, it felt peaceful. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from the absence of noise. It was a deeper peace, the kind that comes from knowing you are loved, and that the people you love are safe. I looked at the cake, a beautiful, hopeful new beginning, and my heart felt so full it ached. I took a deep breath and let the sweet, familiar scent of chocolate fill my lungs. For the first time in a very long time, I felt whole.